Hi everyone, I'm Ishit Vachrajani. I'm an enterprise strategist with AWS, and I'm very excited to be joined by Phil Weiser, Executive Vice President and CTO of Viacom CBS. Phil, welcome.
Great, thank you so much. I'm glad to join you today, Ashit. It's an amazing time, obviously, for the media industry, and I'm glad to talk through how we're managing that and really adapting to all the changes, not only in the industry, but within our company.
Fantastic. Now, speaking about change, Phil, that's our topic today. You and Viacom CBS have gone through quite a bit of change in the last couple of years. That might even be an understatement. Can you please walk us through that journey?
The obvious overriding change in the market has been the shift in consumer behavior from a traditional cable or broadcast model to streaming. And that wave, which has been growing and growing over the past decade, is really now transforming the way we think about how we create content and obviously how we distribute content. And the genesis of Viacom CBS was really our leadership recognizing that scale was important in the market, that Viacom CBS is a combined entity merging Viacom and CBS together would only accelerate the changes that we were making as individual companies. So it's been off to the races since, really driving transformation at every level of the company as it relates to not only technology and operations, but how we produce and distribute our content. And that's been an incredible opportunity as the Chief Technology Officer of the combined company to bring together cultures, generate a path for transformation, and then getting our overall combined teams lined up and in execution against those visions. So that's what I'm looking forward to sharing with you today.
Fantastic. And that's a lot of change that you described there, from the industry to the merger. Let's start with the merger because that's something that, regardless of industry, many of the leaders have to often deal with. And that's a significant change. When Viacom and CBS came back together, from a culture or organizational standpoint, were there any differences and how did you approach that?
There were differences. I mean, we had grown as separate companies for well over a decade. The companies were, just for reference, a joined company about in 2006. They were separated into individual companies and have worked independently since then. The differences in the culture really ranged in philosophies around software development, philosophies around program and change management, but we were unified in our view that we had to adopt these mega trends in technology to create a net new operating model for one of the world's largest media companies, and that we had to be ambitious in taking on that change. So I think we had really great alignment in terms of the scale and the appetite for that transformation. We also had great alignment around the fact that our strategy for technology was rooted in convergence, where we saw that all of our technology efforts ultimately were going to be based on net new internet and cloud-based technologies, that was the foundation for change. And then we had to rethink those things that historically we thought were really powerful differentiating technologies or capabilities, and reframe them in the context of this new world where really you can do everything in a cloud-based and internet model. And that did take some work and a lot of sessions to make sure that we had a belief system around that. And then once we established that belief system, then we turned that into a plan for action.
Great. The point that you made there around aligning on common vision. At Amazon, we often talk about being stubborn on the vision, but flexible on the details. There may be different way of working and doing things, but as long as you're pulling in the same direction, that's such an important part of change. So Phil, what are your biggest challenges communicating and collaborating during uncertain times and bringing large teams together?
Well, the key thing was lining up with the business. So as a technology leader, I always go business first, make sure that we're lined up with our corporate strategy, which is really all about unleashing the power of content, making sure that we're creating the highest quality content experiences for our consumers, whether they're consuming them on our direct-to-consumer streaming services like Pluto TV or soon to be Paramount Plus, or through our partners that have been distributing through for decades. We wanted to make sure we stayed focused on that business outcome. And that really came back to saying, look, we have to innovate faster. We need to enable our businesses to create new content experiences cheaper and faster than they've ever been able to do before. And an example of that, I would say, is launching a new channel. Previously, if you wanted to launch a new channel in some market, it would be generally a multi-year process to make the decisions and then try out the idea. An example recently is we launched Country Music Television Australia, and we did that in 6 weeks. And we did it in an all-cloud model. We did it in a completely remote environment where none of the teams were ever in the same room. And we're able to deliver that to market and try out a new idea. Now, of course, it was a relatively small part of the business, but it just proved out that moving faster gives us many more opportunities to adapt to the market and make sure that our businesses are really feeling the change and feeling the fact that they can take more chances, more risks in trying new ideas in the market, which was not the case previously.
Great. Speed is certainly important in any business, but especially in media and entertainment business where consumer expectations are changing so rapidly and so fast around the world. Now, going through a merger, it's a big change in normal times. But in your case, I think you were still probably going through the whole integration effort when the global pandemic hit. How did that actually change your integration effort as you were going through combining these different teams and merger?
And we were, just actually the early stages of the integration, given that we were really only about 4 months into the integration process when everyone was immediately moved to home. Fortunately, one of the key elements of our strategy as it relates to employee technology was all mobile, all remote. We wanted everyone to be able to work out of a browser window to get every part of their job done. And we were well on the path to doing that. Not completely, but we're well on the path to doing that. And certainly, we had already established a video conferencing culture where you didn't have to physically be in the room to be in the conversation. And that served us well. And like most other companies, our last day in the office was March 12th, and on March 13th, our experiment test to work from home has now been an 8+ month journey, and we expect that to continue well into 2021. So it did actually accelerate our employee technology efforts. It also impacted production because we were in an environment now with COVID where we could not have 100 people in a room doing a production at the same time. So we became very skilled at compartmentalizing different elements of production, doing many more things remote. And we actually came up with some really interesting technologies to create an experience that seemed like it was geographically combined, but in fact wasn't. And one example is a new show that we launched, the Drew Barrymore Show. We're filming that in our broadcast center in New York. And during the tapings, we want to have guests from LA, but the restrictions to move people between those cities, it can be daunting. So we actually created an environment where there's a stage in LA and a stage in New York that the guests can sit in those two separate areas, 3,000 miles apart, but on the screen it looks like they're just having a natural conversation right next to one another. And that's worked incredibly well. And there are dozens of other examples of where we've used technology to overcome some of these limitations that are imposed on us by COVID. And I think a lot of them are going to stick. Certainly, the ability to use the cloud for remote production, post-production is something that people have found incredibly valuable. We put on the Video Music Awards with a fraction of the number of people that would have generally been on location. In fact, the producer of the Video Music Awards was sitting in Los Angeles and producing the shoots in New York City, which was unprecedented, never done before. And our hope is that these learnings will help us again be more adaptive, be more agile in the way we produce content.
Awesome, fantastic. Yeah, I think bringing live event and sports back must have been a significant change. You also brought golf back, and I want to thank you for that. And I'm sure my and I'm sure my daughter thanks you for bringing the MTV Awards back, because the show must go on, right? During the crisis, were there any changes that were first off limit that your team had to embrace? And what was the impact of that, if you can share some examples?
The biggest change was the fact that we were willing to take risks that were currently unacceptable. Moving an entire production to a net new operating model in a matter of days. Normally that would have taken years, and we would have had to deal with blackout periods when we knew it was safe or there was a lower volume of events or activities. But this forced us to really take on these new production models. In particular, CBS News has just done an incredible job. During the peak of the pandemic in New York City, we had our anchors like Gayle King sitting in their apartments with a single remote controlled camera, and we were putting on CBS This Morning. That never would have happened before. That Studio 57, where we normally shoot that, would have dozens and dozens of people managing that environment with several people dedicated just to one anchor. And now we had one person sitting in a room with a kind of a semi-pro camera going to broadcast. And it looked acceptable. It's not at the level that we would keep it for all time, but those things were off limits and never would have been done before. And now we're doing them on a daily basis.
So, Phil, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about changing consumer expectations and behaviors. And that's not just for media entertainment, but every industry is dealing with that, and there are a lot of new opportunities. What trends are you seeing when it comes to consumer expectations and behaviors in our industry?
Well, I would certainly say the overriding change is the volume of content that's being consumed. Like, who would have thought that an average person could consume more than 24 hours of content in any given day, which is true in many cases as people are multitasking on multiple screens. So I think our number one priority as a company is to make sure that we continue to be the world leader in producing a high volume of incredibly high quality content that resonates with consumers. And then as a technology and operations group supporting those productions and the processing and distribution of that content, that we can facilitate that in a way that enables it to be available globally. An element that goes with that is also, our existing catalog. We have one of the world's largest catalogs of television and film content. The other element is just the expectations around quality of content that's showing up on the television screen. This is a phenomenon that's been going on for many, many years. Fortunately, with our CBS brand, we've been producing some of the highest quality content in the world for many decades across our cable portfolio. A very strong group, obviously, with brands that span Nickelodeon through to Comedy Central. And what we're doing now is saying, look, we can build on the franchises that were established in the cable era and bring them into the streaming era. And we're doing that with shows like SpongeBob, where the new SpongeBob movie is going to be exclusively released on Paramount Plus. That would have been unthinkable in other times. That would have gone to theater, but there is no theater right now. So we're really, I think, being very adaptive to the market and taking advantage of the strength of those brands and the shift in consumer behavior to, consuming more quality and having, really high expectations for the quality of that content.
You talked about having amazing content library, and then also the complexities associated with finding, curating, and distributing that around the world. What role is cloud and technology playing in this journey and your ability to respond to these changes?
And cloud is the enabler. And it really is the core of our strategy. We've put together an incredible partnership with AWS to facilitate that transition. And this spans a broad range of things. And I'll just give you a sampling of what we're pushing forward with as a company in this massive transformation. We're taking all of our linear channels and moving them to a cloud-only model, which means every show that comes in and forms a channel, and the way we play out and distribute that will all be done in a cloud/internet environment. We're also now using technologies available in the cloud environments, thanks to the wide variety of capabilities that are now off the shelf from AWS. We're using technologies like recognition to automatically tag, identify assets down to the scene level, character level, and then using that tagging to achieve some of the things I just mentioned, and understanding what assets are available, what is in those assets, and even going as far as building recommenders in terms of distribution. I mean, we hear a lot about recommendation systems for consumers that are coming up through streaming services, but being able to understand this deep portfolio of content that we have and optimizing the way we distribute that and make it available through all channels is really the goal. And we're leveraging the cloud for that because we are moving all of our assets into a cloud environment, processing it with these advanced technologies, and then using it to distribute it globally. So really, the cloud has been, as I mentioned earlier, the mega trend that we're building on. And I say that not in the way that I would have said it even 8 years ago when I did my first major cloud journey at a previous company with AWS, which was primarily around applications and infrastructure. Really, over the last couple of years, it's now possible to take core broadcast and media operations and run them in a cloud-based environment. And one example that I saw recently was the partnership with Verizon and AWS. We're looking at live sports production running over 5G networks. Directly into our cloud environment to produce, process, and deliver that out. And you can imagine when we put on large sporting events, sometimes we would have 40 to 50 major trucks surrounding a stadium to process all the video and deal with the clips and the replays. And a big portion of that work now can be done in a geographically remote environment thanks to what's happening with the cloud providers. So I would say the ability of the cloud to work in broadcast and our core media supply chain, that is one of the key elements of our vision. And that, as I mentioned earlier, that was a belief system that we had to build into many parts of our company, because we have some of the best broadcast engineering teams in the world. And they take the quality of what we deliver to heart every day. And we did not want to put the quality of our experience for consumers, the quality of content we put on the screen, we did not want to put that at risk. So we had to really make sure that we understood, as we were stepping into this new world, how we were going to do it, and then bring the people with that domain expertise along. And a final note on that is it came down to training. So within Viacom CBS, we've now trained well over 1,200 of our employees in AWS cloud technologies. Some of that introductory, just to understand the basics of what it means to run a cloud environment, through to very advanced serverless skills that were not there before, to understand how we can take advantage of the wide range and the really rapidly evolving set of capabilities within AWS and other cloud providers.
Great. That's a significant transformation journey there, Phil. And we talked about the fact that it's a constant change. You mentioned moving from, in the past, sort of application migration to now really taking advantage of advanced capabilities. How do you think you have progressed with your overall transformation journey?
Well, we've got wins. So we, as a company, generally work toward a quick win type of scenario that ties to a long-term vision. And we actually use the Objectives and Key Results Framework, or OKR framework, to make sure that we're aligned on those big vision objectives, but then we're tracking to results that are measurable and repeatable. And it allows us to tie to, I think, the vision you had mentioned earlier, saying, be united on the vision, but flexible on the execution. We're doing that. And that example I provided earlier of a cable channel being stood up in a matter of weeks is a proof of that. We've definitely on the overall IT transformation had incredible progress, just merging the companies together, making sure that our employees in a combined Viacom CBS basis can collaborate quickly and easily. And now in terms of the migration of our core media operations, we're still in early days in that journey, but we're certainly on path to complete the goals we had set out over that 2-year plus time frame.
Great. And this requires tremendous leadership. Are there things that you have changed in your leadership style going through this change?
I think the key element of managing through any type of change like this is transparency. So, as someone who was trained as an engineer, we all know if you were brought up through a classical, I'm an electrical engineer, communication was not part of my curriculum. So, the ability to make sure I'm constantly talking to all levels of our team, and then listening and learning from them, and adapting our strategy based on what they're seeing as we're pushing forward on the vision has really been key. So that transparency in the goal, I think, has been the biggest point of success, because there's no lack of understanding of where we want to go, and there's a recruitment of this broad base of talent that we have to help us figure out the journey and how we're going to get there. So I think that transparency is key. As I mentioned earlier, constant, even quick communications has been really a key element of this. And then the other part of this has been really making sure that we're bringing the business into the dialogue very early. So across our content creation groups, out through our content licensing and our international teams. I mean, we are constantly on a road show, going around and explaining what's happening in the world as it relates to technology enablement, and then bringing that home in terms of our execution and our roadmap and our plans to make sure that it lines up with those business plans as well.
As you look to the future, what are you most excited about?
Well, I'm excited about just the consumer benefit of this market change right now. The fact that I can go on and find such incredibly theatrical quality dramas on a regular basis that are available in large numbers now in the market. So as someone that has a creative background and I've always been in media and technology, my passion for the creative side of the business is unbounded. And I think the opportunity for artists, storytellers, has never been greater than it is right now. So this golden age, if you will, of video is something that just it's an incredibly unique, opportunity for that creative talent that I hope continues. And I hope that we get unique voices that are accessible to the market in ways that were previously not possible. I think we're getting a more diverse set of voices in the market, and we've put several programs at Viacom CBS in motion to make sure in front of the screen, behind the screens, in the writer's room, that we have a diverse set of voices that are telling new stories, and they can get to large audiences. So I think that expansion of thought on the creative side and the ability to reach audiences in unprecedented ways, that's what gets me up in the morning. That's what gets me excited about what I do.
Fantastic. Sage advice there, Phil. Thank you so much for your time and sharing those insights today. It's amazing to learn about your journey and Viacom CBS's transformation journey. Thank you again, Phil, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. We'll talk soon.